In this video I'm going to talk about carbs and the role in which they play a role in our diet. Carbs are used for energy, for our brain and our body. Our brain primarily uses carbs as a source of fuel. That's why people typically feel very lethargic and groggy when they convert to an extremely low carbohydrate diet for an extended period of time, because they're deficient in carbs. There is 4 calories per gram of carb, no matter what the source of carb. Whether it's 1 gram of carb from Mars bars, sweet potato, brown rice, ice cream, it's still 4 calories per gram. No one macronutrient makes you fat. Fat doesn't make you fat, protein doesn't make you fat, carbs don't make you fat directly. It's the accumulation of a calorie surplus at the end of the day what's going to contribute to your weight gain. If you're eating more than you burn, you're going to gain weight. If you're eating at your equilibrium, you're going to maintain. And if you're eating at a deficit, you're going to still lose weight, no matter the combination of foods or combination of macronutrients as well. Atkins was made popular as one of the early low-carb diets. Typically people lose a lot of weight on that kind of program because they're losing an overabundance of water weight in the first couple of weeks, because when you reduce carbs you're actually reducing the amount of water weight you're retaining as well, because there's 3 grams of water for every 1 gram of carbs. So you can see how your water weight can fluctuate with that kind of program. And when you add carbs typically back in, that is typically when you gain some of the weight back. Typically it's nothing special reducing your carbohydrate intake, you're just reducing the caloric intake you're consuming. For example, I eat 500 grams of carbs a day. If I was to reduce that to 0, I would reduce that would be reducing my calories by 2,000 calories, which would create a large calorie deficit, and I would be losing weight very quickly. Not that I'm advocating that, but it's just something to consider. It's nothing special about reducing your carbs, it's the caloric reduction. Typically, if you respond very well to carbs, you have very good insulin sensitivity. As well, if you on the flip side, if you have a big bowl of pasta and you feel very, very sleepy and lethargic after eating that amount of carbohydrates, you have bad insulin sensitivity and you're more on the insulin resistant side of the spectrum. Things like height, age, and muscle mass can dictate how many carbs someone can actually consume. For example, if someone is maintaining weight on 2,000 calories and they're taking 50% of their calories from carbs, they can consume 250 grams per day. On the flip side, if someone's eating 1,500 to maintain their weight and they're eating 50% of their calories from carbs, they can consume 188 grams. So you can see how that can fluctuate depending on the person. So it's a very individual thing, even if the percentages are the same. People fear carbs usually because of the insulin response they produce. In reality, anything gives an insulin response food-wise, whether it be protein or fat as well, not just carbohydrates. Fat gain, again, is dictated by overall calorie balance and intake at the end of the day, whether you're in a surplus or a maintenance mode, or if you're in a deficit. The process of lipolysis occurs in between meals when your blood sugar is lowered. That is when the body will be using fat again as a source of fuel. Typically when you eat a meal, your insulin levels have been raised, but again, that will lower in between meals, so you don't need to worry about having a carb and producing a ton of insulin and then you won't be able to burn fat. Once your blood sugar is lowered, your body will continue breaking down fat tissue in between meals, things of that nature. As well, the glycemic index is not an irrelevant study. That was tested on fasted individuals for a blood glucose response, but they did it on fasted individuals and they were just consuming just carbs. The immediate thing to think about when you think about that is when you add protein or fat or a vegetable to a source of carbohydrate meal, the overall glycemic index is lowered, so the impact on your blood glucose is lowered. So that's something to take into consideration. You don't need to really need to worry about it. The glycemic load as well is something people obsess about. Typically carrots have a high GI, but they have a low glycemic load, meaning you would have to have an overabundance of carrots to have a high insulin response. So that's something you don't really need to worry about. Again, if you have a protein or a fat or a fiber with carbohydrates, the overall GI of the meal has been lowered. As well, there is an insulin index which can be used to determine the insulin response of certain foods. Again, protein can elevate insulin just as much as carbs. For example, on the insulin index, white pasta has a GI of 46 and an insulin response of 40, whereas fish has a GI of 28 but an insulin response of 59, which is greater than white pasta. So you can see that protein has an effect on insulin as well. The reality is you don't need to worry about it. What's going to dictate your body composition is overall calorie intake at the end of the day. As well, timing of the carbohydrates don't really matter. Obviously, you want to be having some kind of carbohydrate around your workout for fueling you before the workout and restoring minor glycogen restoration post-training, but it's something you don't really need to obsess about. At other times of the day, you can still have carbs and it'll still be fine. It's the overall caloric intake what you need to worry about. You theoretically could consume all your carbohydrates at the end of the day, but if you were in a deficit, even if you ate them right before bed, you would still lose weight. And on the flip side, if you eat all of them around your training but you're in a surplus, you would still gain weight. So it's something to take into consideration, and you don't really need to worry about the glycemic index, glycemic load, or insulin index. You just need to worry about the overall macronutrient intake at the end of the day and the caloric intake you're having at the end of the day, dependent upon your goal. And you don't really need to worry about all that. Again, if you need any help regarding getting in shape or nutrition advice, be sure to contact me via Facebook, and I'll speak to you soon.